1, go.
All right, welcome everyone to this week's weekly roundup. Today, with us today, we just got Robert because everyone else is on break apparently.
Oh no! They all had stuff to do. Life.
So, Robert, would you like to give a summary?
Yeah, so I'll give a breakdown of what the team's been doing over the last week since the last time you heard from us. So, from my standpoint, I've been going in and cleaning up the loading screen. We went and we grabbed some community screenshots, and we're adding those into the new loading screens. So that's cool. The tooltips are redone. They size a little bit better. I know, kind of interesting stuff there. Um, Beyond that, I also worked on redoing the weapons platform for vehicles in preparation of getting the Apache's FARs and Hellfire missiles online. At the very least, I'll be doing the FARs right now. It's like a little missile pod one. And then I'll leave the anti-air version offline until we add the anarchist vehicles and the faction vehicle stuff. But at the very least, my goal is either tonight or tomorrow to have the Apache secondary fires operational. Um, and just basically, I'm just rewriting it so that way the AI knows, like, hey, I have a second weapon. I should be censoring that one at the same time that I do the other one, and make sure that if it's like situational to a side of the gun, like what vehicle? Like, I give you an example. This could be expanded to the Black Hawk. It could be expanded to the Little Bird. It could be expanded to like when we add the Abrams, so that way the main barrel can target something independently of the machine gun, or like you can basically have two different targets being acquired and tracked and shot as you're playing. Is the idea of it? So that way, like you might see like the Apache shoot something else with the rockets and shoot something else with the actual, cannon. So that's something that I'm working on right now to get that operational and working, so we can expand it to the Little Bird and the Black Hawk in the future. So then that way we can add crew gunners to the Black Hawk as an upgrade. We can add the miniguns, and we can add the rocket pods to the Little Bird as an upgrade. And then we can also add in the sensor apparatus that I was talking about previously to track Greg's or the Leviathans underground as well. And then obviously it'll also affect later on vehicles that get added into the game, or like doctrine vehicles that get added and they have more than one weapon. And then you'll be able to toggle them on and off. Um, Based off of playtesting, we'll probably have it to initially when we will like Red Dragon wargaming franchise, and then if people are like, if it feels kind of weird, we'll probably also have it where you can right click the button to toggle it automatically firing on and off, and then you can left click it to choose to fire a missile somewhere. So it's something we're going to be playing with and play testing with and experimental before we push it over to normal. Michael has been working on the animations of the game. He's been converting over more of the characters from the old rig to the new rig, from Character Creator, and just working out all the bugs and all the kinks of just making sure everything's functional. Because you'll notice when you play the game on experimental or just normal, if you look very closely, the assault and some of the older characters have a different suite of animations than like the newer characters, like the heavy, the spec ops, the operator. Um, so like we're slowly but surely converting them all over as like one of the goals going into 1.2 in the next week or two. Efren's been basically looking into basically procedural generation of some of the buildings, like what the Matrix demo does with Houdini, and basically seeing what we could do to get more volume, more scale out of like our city to kind of like generate some of it a little bit more dynamically, and then bake it in via converting it to static meshes. So that's something he's converting with, because we realize that's what the Matrix demo does for their streets and a couple other things. They paint it somehow. So he's been looking and researching that tech to see if we could like find ways of like building cities quicker and more efficiently that way in the future. Uh, let's see what else. And then we've been working on. Let's see what was. We saw the aircraft carrier that was textured. Some minor adjustments here and there because it has an interior that actually has elevators working and all that stuff. So eventually we're gonna get that modeled and textured to a point and rigged to where it works, and then we can come back to it. We'll add it to where you can basically build stuff to it, build air units from aircraft carrier and bring them up and down via the elevators and use them to like stage attacks. Because ultimately, the aircraft carrier will be getting resupplies and gas and the ability to build air units only at that thing. It'll have a health bar allocated to it, and it'll be targetable by the Leviathan. So it's something that we're, you know, pushing towards ever so slowly. Am I missing anything, Derivar, from what I told you earlier?
Not really. I don't think so.
I
No,
don't believe so. I mean, there's probably
I
some
believe I
minor
believe that's
tidbits
pretty
we
good.
missed. But anyway, back to you, Derivar. That's our week roundup so far across the board.
All right. So touching base again on
Oh wait,
what
I
you said
missed
about
one. I'm
the new.
sorry. I'm so sorry. I just remembered something. Derek.
That's right.
Derek's working on the new early game. He's been going in and essentially setting it up so that well, there's a Steam thread on it. If you want to know what I'm talking about, you can go and check out the Steam thread. It's pinned in general discussions, and it generally just breaks down like having better ramp up of like of the escalation of the game of like everything start at 11. The Chelsea starts randomly somewhere on the map. She has to find a hive. She builds a hive. From there, she constructs a hive. She builds builders. Those builders construct other things for her instead of the standard infected constructing everything. So that way it's a little bit harder for them to sneak behind your lines and just build a hive. Like you have to actually see a builder unit go and build there. That's something that we're gonna get right now. It'll be the old system of just building it dynamically, but we'll switch over to the builder unit for her in foreseeable future, next couple of weeks, hopefully. Um, but again, she builds a hive, then she starts dynamically generating gas towers, dynamically generating defense pods. She'll dynamically generate walls, so we'll be adding in. So she'll like do like the plague growth from State of Decay 2, for instance, where like she'll have like incomplete walls or complete walls around her hive or around her like her pods, so then that way she can force you into basically like claustrophobic areas and just kind of make you come where she wants you to come. Obviously, you'll be able to attack them, but you'll only be able to attack them with flame weapons, grenades, explosive weapons, flamethrowers, anything that really goes boom. Only the only thing that really can hurt those infection like biomass walls. Bullets won't; they'll be impervious. And the idea is that we'll be pushing that system, so she'll dynamically construct walls, and we'll be pushing it so she does traps eventually. That's more of a wish list thing. But for right now, we're trying to get the base system in for the new early game. If she can build very basic stuff, she pops out a lieutenant every 5 or 10 minutes as a commander. That commander determines, am I under siege? Tries to break out of that siege. If they're not under siege and you just left her to her own devices and you're turning somewhere else, they'll choose a direction, push in that direction, and start spreading the virus. Um, and then when the game first starts, you'll get news feed notifications on the game basically saying Grizzly murders and grid blah blah blah. The public stunned by X, Y, and Z. And you'll like so when it first starts, it will show like, information of like where the game thinks she is. So that way you can get an idea where she is, where she's spreading the infection before she sets up her hive. And then once she sets up her hive, it'll still notify you, like to a very basic degree. It'll just let you know generally where she is, because those circles that we got, we'll be getting rid of those circles that basically visualize where they are. So it's more of like, okay, you'll get these nude feed clippings where you're like, where are they? Like, I gotta find them. I gotta build drones. I gotta get out there and actually scout and look for her, because those circles were always temporary until we had the time and resources to just do the new early game and give players tools to basically hunt and track her. I.e., the scout helicopter and the newsfeed clippings of you're basically getting civilian reports of what's going on in the city. Um, yeah, that's everything we're working on, and that'll go right into 1.2 for civilian management. Okay, back to you, Derivar. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So touching base on the new rigging that you were earlier, what's the more finer details into that? What's really going into the whole workings around on doing the whole new rigging?
Better IK and fabric setup, so then that way we can do less animations by hand and more dynamically. To where basically we can dynamically set the left hand to grab the gun, and there'll be less instances of it clipping. Because some of the old guns clip a lot when you're looking at them very closely. With the fabric and the IK setup that Michael's been doing, I mean, clipping is pretty much non-existent. with the newer weapons and the newer characters. I mean, I'm sure there's some instances where it might happen, maybe a bug or whatever, but it's just better quality of animations. We're using more of the mocaps. It's cleaner to animate with. Um, and we redid the entire animation blueprint because it's like when you first do something, you learn the do's and don'ts, and then the second time you're like, okay, let's improve upon the design. Let's figure out how to make it more efficient. Let's make it easier to read. Let's make it cleaner, so and that kind of idea. So like it's like animation blueprint V1 versus anime blueprint V2 is that we learned from all the mistakes we made in the first one to improve the second one, and then we're slowly but surely bringing over characters to it to just kind of like make everything look visually better. Um, yeah,
Okay. It'll be good to have visually better characters, I must say.
yes, that's something else we're doing is we're re-exporting out. The new lieutenants are in for Chelsea. Sorry, for not Chelsea's in. I'm mistaken. Chelsea and Winter should be coming in the next week or so. New Winter's photorealistic model should be in next patch, hopefully. If not, Michael doesn't run to any other issues of optimization with her because she's like really high poly when you're up on her, and then she drops substantially. Like she's more of like a really photorealistic. She's like the quality of like Laura from Tomb Raider in terms of poly count texture. So she's a hero character, so we allocate more budget to her. But we're just making sure everything's good. She and this testing it, making sure that everything's optimized. And we'll do the same thing for Chelsea lieutenants, and then the lieutenants will actually get a bump in quality uh, quietly, probably behind the scenes in the next week or two, after we work out a couple kinks with their textures, so they look better in their faces and whatnot. So yeah, that is coming, and then you'll get the new assault. We're working out a crash slash instability issue of character creator with the manufacturer. So when we get the new assaults in, because right now the assaults on the operator are like kind of raw, so they're not optimal for being mass producing them yet until we can get the draw calls down and the amount of materials on them down. So once we do that, then you'll see the operator go back to the spec ops and you'll see the assaults get the new sexy mesh that the operators been using at third person. Um, and then yeah, that'll be like a huge imprint in terms of like changing the aesthetics of the game because they just look so much better. And they have like the gas mask respirator already done, so we'll start going towards that direction and making the infection more deadly in terms of like when you go in and out of zones and whatnot. But we can go into that later if someone has a question about that. So I don't tread off. Back to you, Dervar.
Yeah. Um, Touching base on when it comes to lieutenants, this is something I just thought of now. When it comes to lieutenants, obviously Chelsea gets her lieutenant,
Yeah.
right? But Winters and CERC, would we be able to level up? Say a unit goes, he survives several operations, he levels up a lot. Could we possibly promote him to be a lieutenant of CERC and have him have certain buffs such as higher armor, higher health, special weapons, something like that?
Look, that's always been the operator for us from a design standpoint. Like the operator is, well, I'll be honest, we've got a lot of flack by adding the operator and adding in the ability to switch between third person and first person. So to avoid the negative feedback we've gotten, we've kind of left the operator stagnant until more of the RTS aspects are like improved and tweaked. And then we want to come back to the operator and add what you're saying in terms of basically an ability selection, an RPG type system of leveling them up, and making him a persistent battlefield unit that you bring into all of your play sessions. And that by playing him in one play session, he can get stronger, and then you can bring him into another play session stronger or a new play session to get like a boost. Because theoretically, you can get him more strong. He's stronger than Winters. But it's about for us leveling, weighing our pros and our cons. That like right now, we just need to focus more on the RTS, get the civilian management, get the bugs, get some of the other aspects like that situated, so we can make the community happy. And then when things calm down, the factions of the civilian management are in, then we're going to go in there and give the operator a facelift and just make sure everything is nice and tidy for like the 3P operation and the RTS operation. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. Um, so we were talking about earlier the modular system. Right? You mentioned about the tanks being able to, fire separately from the machine gun. Right?
Yes.
What what would really go into that? Like, what are the more detailed aspects of doing a system like that?
Well, we have to rewrite our AI controller because right now the AI controller only has a perception or an idea of like there's one weapon. Like it's basically like it's very woody in terms of like, okay, you have one weapon, use that weapon, and go through a scene list of targets, figure out which one is the higher threat to you, and then based off of that, shoot the target that's the greatest threat to you. And every unit shares information to a certain degree, and every unit calculates their scene list dynamically based off of what's around them, what type of enemy they are, and if they've taken damage from them, it ups the seed list. So it's about taking into consideration that seed list and then having prioritizations of like, oh, like maybe the missile pod will favor people that are like blow up guys or juggernauts over the standard 50 caliber machine guns, like on like the well, I'll say like the Apache or like the battle tank will focus standard infected. It's setting it up so that it knows like, hey, I'm going to prioritize these infected, and then when those infected are down, I'm going to go to the next stack of prioritization based off of their threat. And then knowing as well at the same time, if I fire a missile that's close to me, it's going to kill these people. It's going to kill myself. So it's about also just kind of like adjusting that logic. And then at the same time, making sure that like the body of the vehicle processes all the threats around it, and then it sends the order and the rotation. Like it sends, like if anyone's ever played World of Tanks or World of Warships, it basically sends the enemy information of like, okay, turret one, your enemy is this guy, rotate in that direction. And then when you're within a certain angle, shoot that target. Turret two, your threat's over there. You're gonna shoot this one because he's a blow up guy, and my ammo is set to my weapon is set to target this infected over this infected first. So you're gonna shoot that blow up guy with the main cannon or whatever. Like I'm talking hypotheticals, of course, but like that's generally how we're setting it up, so that the AI is very sophisticated in terms of knowing like, oh, that's a threat. I need to kill him with this gun, so you don't always have to babysit them. Because a lot of feedback we've gotten is that the game is like, because it keeps getting larger, it's a lot of units, and when units get larger, like we eventually inevitably have to up the population count. It's going to be even more hands-on, a lot overwhelming for people. So the biggest thing is at least having it to where the AI can make tactical decisions on their own if you enable them to. Like, because I think we're going to end up going the route based off community feedback is having it to where you can right click and toggle to shoot those special like secondary weapons like the missiles and all that stuff automatically, or you can tell it to manually shoot like a company heroes. And I think this is the route we're going to go, but it'll come down to playtesting. But that's generally what goes into those systems. And right now, I was actually before we started the AMA, I was doing some corrective code for the angles because I'm testing it on the JLTV. And then I'm going to scale it up to the Apache because I'm rewriting the whole target control system. I'm rewriting the whole way that they see units, and then testing it, and then basically putting it to the ringer over the next today, tomorrow, day after that. So hopefully we can get it out soon on experimental, and then test it. So what you guys think, and then go from there. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. So infected walls. I love the idea of infected walls. I really do. That's something that gets me really giddy. So infected walls, when it really comes down to how claustrophobic they're going to be, and how solid they're going to be, right? Will you be able to clear it with, say, bombing strikes, like regular old bombing strikes, or will it have to be like napalm or flamethrowers or anything like that?
You can pretty much kill it with any kind of bombing strike, any kind of flamethrower, with the striker rounds, with the mortar, with the grenades. The flamethrower will be the best one. It'll get a damage boost based off of like when you're burning them, because I mean, who doesn't want to have that cool napalm moment of like running through a neighborhood burning all the biomass that it receipts, and it decays and dies and all that fun stuff. So it's like that's generally the idea it's going in, and they'll set those up randomly based off of what they think will make the area more defensible. So they'll like close off streets, they'll funnel you this way, they'll funnel you that way. Um, and that's generally the idea we're going in, is basically having it that way. We're sneaking that system in because that was supposed to be in there like eons ago. But the compromise we're doing now is adding it to where it's only around infection pods. Because originally, we were going to do it all with the entire map, but that blew up people's computers because there was just too many meshes to do dynamically. by just enabling them until too many extra draw calls. So we're going to just do it situationally around pods, gas towers, and all that, and then see how things are and scale up as computers can actually handle it, and whatnot. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting because you figure like we're talking about also having it where they have one-way walls. If you've ever played like Battle for Middle Earth 1 or 2, they would have those little secret walls. A good example is the movie when they have that little like side entrance that Gimli and all of them go through. Is basically like having little like entry and exit points for them to get in and out for the infection walls. So that's something we're looking into, or having it to where they can spit like ramps, so they can have like they can run up, they can run over the wall, but you can't go. It's like basically it's a ramp, so it's a one-way ramp. Those are things that we're looking into. So we're gonna see, but obviously the first step of it will be we're going to just simply have it to where it's just a random wall growth. You can see examples of it in the dev updates announcement. I'll post them in podcast text in a second. I gotta find them, and they'll just show up and they'll just limit your mobility is the idea, and then eventually we'll get traps and all that online as time permits. Back to you, Devar.
Yep. Um, Second, I'm just gonna find where I am. Uh, so when it the pods, the pods, something I want to talk about too. When we were talking about it earlier, you said that Chelsea might be able. Well, you're trying to work on a system where it allows Chelsea to sort of build pods in like a triangle to really screw you over.
Yes.
So how in which shape or form technically will that actually take place, and how will that go in the way in ways of implementing it, making sure it works correctly, and making sure that it's not too overwhelming?
So the first step of that is we implemented a system this week that is on experimental actually, where essentially if you're in a conflict zone, when she first takes a zone, like if she's constantly under attack, or she senses she's going to be under attack potentially, she will build her pods closer, and that will allow her to get reinforcements out sooner. But on the flip side, it slows how quickly she can tick the infection in that zone, because they can't infect people as quickly in that zone. But when they space out their pods and they detect that it's passive or neutral, or you're just not giving her a fight, she'll spread out her pods further, which in turn increases the infection level in her zone, which then in turn infects people quicker. So she can add to her army behind the scenes. Um, and the next layer to that we were talking about earlier, when we joined the AMA, would be essentially having it to where she would know to destroy a pod and basically move it around your base, so she can open up other entries of attack. So like that way, like your triangle, like you're at the bottom of the triangle and there's 2 points on the right, and then a point directly in front of you. Is that like somewhere in the center or somewhere at the bottom is something that we'd want to do, to basically have it to where she'd encircle you or encircle your perimeters, so you can't get out. You can't send reinforcements, because the idea is that they'd be ran into by the infected, or the infected would know they're coming, and then they'd build walls or other stuff to close them off. So you have to get air units in there. So that's one of the things that we're looking into in terms of basically like as we get the dynamic pods in, we're gonna look into basically having it where she'll deconstruct them and move them around in a zone if she has the resources available to her. Like if you're like let's say, give me a hypothetical, you built in the center of a zone and she owns some of the zones around you, or she owns one zone, and she's like, well, I want to take over this base. So then she would find locations that are near your base to put up pods, and then just start sending infected your way to try and overrun you eventually in waves. Because we still have that morale system where it's like if she keeps losing too many people, she'll stop. And then she's supposed to basically at that point then like reevaluate. She needs to send more special infected, she needs to send juggernauts, or she needs to wait for a leviathan as a siege breaker to get through your base. Um, which that system's already in there. Which is like the longer your base is like there, the more pissed she gets, and that she'll theoretically send better units over time. But yeah, back to you, Derma.
Something I'm kind of curious about, because you mentioned state of decay quite a few times. Um, Something I was currently thinking about now is when it comes down to the I'm trying to think that, well, the biomass build areas. I'm trying to think of what their name is now. It's really disgusting things that all the
Play
blood plague
cards.
comes out of. That's it. Thank you. Um, when it comes to the play carts, uh, the DLC campaign that they released basically has an entire town infested with play carts.
Mhm.
When it comes down to those pods being moved around, like you said they were going to do, um, will she be able to put those pods specifically just around your base to constantly keep encroaching on you, encroaching on you until it becomes basically overwhelming?
I mean,
So
that would be yeah. I mean, that would be a thing where if she has the manpower to do it, why not let her do it? Because the idea is that she has the numbers. So the idea is that you're in a ticking time bomb in terms of basically just kind of like, okay, you got to hold her for as long as you can. You're gonna have to take your wins. You're gonna have to take your losses. It's strategically. Sometimes you got to blow a bridge and just leave because you just can't hold her. You know, so it's about giving those gameplay opportunities to the player and in some ways improving the bridge destruction, improving ways that basically you could just kind of deny her access. Like what we were talking about previously of being able to empty a zone properly of civilians. So then that way, if like you're gonna lose a territory, you could just apply an edict to a zone and be like, everyone leave this zone, go to that zone over there. There's a helipad there. And we're gonna apply an edict there that everyone in that zone has to be automatically just deposited into the Chinook and evacuated in like groups of 32 or whatever, and then you just have to build a crap ton of them. So like to me, that's a design goal of the game is to get it to that level of chaoticness, like prototype and all that, where it's like, okay, like you're going to lose sometimes. Like no matter how good you are, she's gonna outplay you, she's gonna outnumber you, and then you're gonna have to just recover and lick your wounds. Like to win every battle is boring. So it's about like, like her using her numbers, like the Zerg in a way, to basically overwhelm your entrenched position to where you have to like frantically try and get everyone out via helicopters or try and mount a counterattack to basically try and get some pressure off of her of like mortaring her pods to make her like retreat or to destroy them. Or like send strike teams in to basically hit her pods from the side to relieve pressure off your main outpost. Like those kind of interesting gameplay opportunities is what we're trying to push for. But obviously, at the same time, is you know, if you don't do anything and you just have that one outpost, she'll overrun it eventually. If you're not like thinking outside the box of ways to basically open up new ways of like bringing her down a notch.
see, that's what I was trying to really get to, trying to get to
Yeah.
is will it something I was going to add to that previous thing I was talking about is will it kind of open up the option to build additional outposts in different areas? Will they will they be a necessary thing, or will they just be okay? I could set up an outpost here, or I could rely on my main base and hopefully just she doesn't, and hopefully hold her back long enough. So would we really have to set up outposts, or would we be able to sort of really rely on the main base?
I'm pushing for more of just like a combination of two based off of how you want to play, because like we have the whole we kind of have like a tall like miner system where like you can upgrade your income off of the zone and then it makes it more viable to like have 2 or 3 zones. But at the same time, like I want to be able to accommodate people that want to. I think it's tall versus wide, what they call it in Stellaris, where it's like if they want to like conquer certain zones and then just have one outpost in that zone where they defend the capture truck, and then whenever there's like whenever the infected like encroach on that territory, they send out a party to get them to retreat. That's feasible. That's doable. But at the same time, if they just want to like hold like their outpost, like their mega fortress, they can do that as well. I'm trying to find a balance of the two because I don't want to like make people have to play tall or make them play wide. I'm trying to give them enough tools so they can play either or, like in Solaris, and then the game just tries to adapt based off of like what feels fair, of like to make them give them a challenge. That make sense?
Yeah. Um. So going back to the inspiration from State of Decay with the play cards, when it comes to zones that are like basically the red zone, right? When it comes to the red zone, will small hordes form? So in State of Decay, there's hordes that form on the map when you're not around,
Yes.
and so basically, when The blood plague has been in an area for too long. It does form a horde of about 14 to 15 enemies, and they just roam around.
Yeah.
Will
So let me think. We don't really have a system in that regard. The most we ever have is so we have a system where it's defensive hordes and offensive hordes. Defensive hordes are when you attack a base, it groups together people, and it basically tries to assert like a you're in charge, go and attack them. It tries to keep them together as much as possible. And it'll dynamically spawn 3 or 4 of these spears with a commander, like an invisible commander, and then send them towards you. And then there's one for attacking as well, but there's nothing for randomly roaming. Um, I know there's a system where we try and sometimes ambiently spawn random roamers around the map. That needs to be improved because when we took a hit to performance in the last like year, or like people's computers were having a heart attack playing the game, we aggressively turned them down because we weren't sure where the costs were coming from. And that's a system that needs to be balanced out and brought back when we basically have like just more randomness, more like I would probably compare it to like the Far Cry system of like 10-second mini stories or 15-second mini stories where it's like random civilians that spawn, random infected that spawn, that have no real like impact on the grand scheme at large, but they're just there for ambience of like, oh look, there's this infected attacking this civilian camp, over here, like little random things that occur. It's just like if you don't interact, they just happen and then it's over. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Are you talking about more like that, or are you talking about like hordes that forcibly interact with your camps, like attacking camps, like they are
So
billions hordes?
no, so it's just hordes that randomly move around the map and they sort of get the order from Chelsea to attack something to kind of test the waters.
We
Uh,
experimented with that. We experimented with that by having them. We used to have infected that would go to sleep in level, like they just freeze and crystallize somewhere on the map, a very long time ago. And I don't think people even noticed it was happening. Because that's why sometimes when you would attack an infected, they wouldn't react, is because they were sleeping in place. It was an idea that we got from that Zack Snyder zombie movie because we were trying to figure out a way of populating the infected like they are billions level of like having persistent AI in the scene and then having it to where they would request to wake up. And then they would basically that way we could have like hundreds, not thousands of infected that are just converted to dead in the terms of no resource cost to them in the world that could wake up in a moment's swim. But the problem we ran into with that is that if we had a bunch that were ambient, some of them couldn't wake up because of the computer resources that were available, so they just get slaughtered. So like that's a system that we need to like regroup on in the future because I'd love to have some kind of like they are billions kind of like persistent infected that are just roaming the map to give it more like an idea of like, oh my god, there's so many of them outside of like the standard infected that are the defensive and offensive waves. But at that point, it's more of like a tech limitation of like we would have to figure out some kind of like magical way of keeping them in on the field but keeping them responsive at a moment's notice. So then that way they're not like just 80% of them are just non-responsive and they're just random units to kill and have no purpose in gameplay, and 20% of them actually can do something because they wake up in time because because we can allocate computer resources to them to like wake them up and run their AI. Um, so yeah, that is an idea, and I want to come back to that because we used to have that, and it was turned off like probably at least 6 8. I think it was about a year ago. Honestly, it was so long ago. It was like somewhere in 2021. Yeah, definitely in 2021. Anyway, sorry, back to you.
that's right. Um, Trying to think of something else we can. So fun. You talked to me that Derek was finishing up the new early game.
Yes.
How is that going so far? How is he? How is he going about it?
So for people who don't know, we pre-place our pods, we pre-place our towers, and we pre-place our defensive pods, I'll call them. And part of that was converting that over to dynamic. So then that way it leads more credence to like when we actually eventually make the infected playable, there's an actual like early game for them planned out. So that way, like, it's not as much work to get that over. So the new early game has been kind of been updating behind the scenes, setting the stage for when we can delegate resources to make the infected playable. We can, because then, like, if anyone's ever played those cat and mouse games or Age of Mythology, they would know what I'm talking about. But, like, you basically have to, like, you start with that one hero. So we set that up. She sets a hive up so she can have that functionality. We just add that to an icon, and the player could play as her theoretically in the future. So it was about basically setting up behind, like, that, and it was also about making it to where it was easier for people to play the game when they first start, because it's not as overwhelming of like billion things are on fire when you first start. And it's been going well, actually. Suki and a couple other people have been. We have a experimental beta branch people can ask to get into, and as long as they give us feedback, we'll leave them on there. And that's like the most cutting edge of, like, we just cook that every day. Not every couple other days, and we were just trying to identify gas towers that are floating, trying to identify pods that are being placed in stupid locations, defense pods that don't make sense. We're adding in the walls tonight, so that way they can build walls, via splines and just do all that cool stuff. And then we'll probably cut it at that point, because we don't want to go too deep into the new early game. We want to just get it to where we can get the bare minimum that's required to satisfy, like, bringing it down a notch so people aren't, like, sweaty in the first 5 minutes of the game, and then get over the civilian management, because that's what the people want. Because ultimately, they want us to get the civilian management and faction situated, which I'm sure Sturvar will get into in a second. For what we were discussing when we joined this room, is like, so speed run. She builds a pod, and then on top of that, she starts popping out lieutenants, and then we're gonna get to the point where she pops out the lieutenant. They decide if they're going to attack it or build somewhere. Like, if it's not a conflict, we'll stop. So we'll stop at the part where the lieutenants are spawned in, they poop out, they do all that fun stuff, and then we'll come back to new early game after we've made the community happy by being able to get some more of the civilian stuff that we're going to talk about in, and getting more of the factions in, and then we'll put the icing on the cake by adding a builder unit to the infected, and then we'll be adding in traps and more strategy, like we were talking about earlier. Besides just the two ways that they build pods, more ways they can build pods, adding it so they can destroy pods and move them based off of getting reinforcements quicker to the battle zone that would make sense, that you can't target. It's outside of your line of sight, just barely, so they can respond to attacks or destroy your base quicker, like a player would. Like backdooring in StarCraft 2. Like when you build a barracks, like right around the corner, or you put a pool right next to someone, and you just start, or like the Protoss tactic where you build like a pylon and the gateways right next to someone's base. You crap out a bunch of zealots, like you start setting them from two different directions to whatnot. But yeah, those kind of tactics make it available to the infected. But yeah, sorry, back to you, Durvar.
That's right. So as you were saying, let's get into what we were talking about earlier. When it comes to the civilian factions and having, like we were talking about raiders and whatnot, the we wouldn't mind having the more of the community's opinion. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, community opinion.
Yeah, more of the community's opinion on what you would think. How you would think the raiders would go if we were to able to recruit them, like go into the camps, recruit them.
You want me to give you
into our
want
army.
me to explain what we were talking about earlier, Durvar? Because you're kind of like
Yeah,
jumping into the end. Okay,
yeah.
so we were just talking
You
about. Well, I
better
got it. Or you
detail.
got it. Okay, so we were just talking earlier before we joined the AMA about basically prioritization of what to do first after we hit 1.2 in the next week or so, because we need to finish up to the lieutenant's part, and then we're going right into 1.2 of civilian management. And one of the first things that I was arguing around, rather debating with Durvar, which one to do first. We settled on doing the dynamic civilian groups first, and when it came down to it, that would mean every single zone rolls a personality. Those personalities are hippie, gun-loving, militarist, whatever, and raider. Based off of those three, they'll have a predisposition of how they see you and how they see other groups around them. And something that Durvar and I were throwing around was having it to where all these groups you could ally with theoretically. The Raiders will have to figure out how that's going to work because they're just going to hate everyone. So that part I'll have to figure out. But if we're talking just purely from the militarist and the peace loving side, we were talking about making them to where basically they have different guns available to them. They're like, because the idea is that I've seen a lot of people talk that they want to recruit civilians and they want to be able to change out their weapons. So a compromise, besides just the ambient civilians that don't really have much purpose value in gameplay, is having it to where when you ally with these groups by just meeting them, because we're basically pulling a page out of Solaris. You walk up to a civilian group, you get a little prompt, he introduces himself, you get an idea of their personality, of how they're going to play, how many people are in their group, and a threat level. And then based off of that, you can choose to ally with them, or ignore them, or kill them all on the spot. And essentially, it'll be like little dynamic camps that just show up, 8, 15 people, basically. Sometimes more if we can allocate more resources to it. And what Durvar was getting into is when you ally with these groups, just by saying, "Hey, I'll protect you," or whatever, then you can recruit out of them like the Indians from Age of Empires, or like and then basically you could get their units and you can switch out weapons that are available only to them, and that the peace lovers will be the worst ones, lowest health, lowest caliber guns, crap. So they're like your cannon fodder. And then the militarists would be somewhere in the middle or at the end, where they have better guns, American-made guns, German guns. They're gun lovers. They collect guns, and they have higher stats, but they'll never compete with CERC. But the idea is they're cheaper. So then that way, if you don't have the facilities to be able to recruit an army, or you don't want to build a base somewhere, you could go up to one of these groups that you've made a friend of and just pay them money. And then you'd be able to recruit out of a pool. Similar to like Warband? What was that game we were talking about earlier?
Yeah,
I played it.
Mountain Blade.
Mountain Blade, where you could go up to a village and be like, "Give me all your best able men." Something like those lines. Because I know people have asked for it. Or I know it's something that we could do. It's just a matter of just doing it. And figure that we can make that a goal of something in 1.2 is that way you can recruit these cannon fodder. They're basically cannon fodder by all means. They're not going to be sophisticated. They're not going to have armor. They'll be very basic, bare bone. I mean, the militarist theoretically be somewhere in the middle or the end, but like they're not going to be able to take as many hits as a CERC unit, but they'll be a hell of a lot cheaper. So that's something we were just kind of throwing around with and just kind of brainstorming what we doing. And then we're talking about the Raiders being in the middle. So originally, I had to figure out how the hell you would ally with Raiders that just want to murder and kill and eat everyone. So you figure like it was going to most likely be where it was going to be like the peace lovers low end, Raiders middle, militarists high level in terms of cost, efficiency, weapon availability. And that's what we were thinking going into 1.2 is pushing a system like that, because I love the whole system from Age of Empires where you can recruit people and all the other stuff. And then this would also be a foundational system that we take on to the factions, so you can recruit their vehicles and recruit their units to have a variation in the gameplay, and each one has their pros and cons that we'd work out balance wise. So that way you're like allying with these groups and able to recruit from them. Because 1.2 civilians, 1.2 is basically the world building. Like more immersion. 1.3 is factions. Pierce, Natalie the anarchist, Pierce the police, SWAT faction, basically. Just people that don't know, haven't seen the roadmap recently. And then obviously there'll be some small little tidbits that we sneak in as we're doing all that, like we always do, based off of feedback on Steam, Discord, or just we read a room one day and we're like, wait, why don't we add dismemberment? So that was the thing. That's basically what happened in 1.1. And we were like, wait, we could do this. We know how to do this now. We figured it out by doing research, accidentally by doing other things, ironically. So, yeah, back to you, Dervar.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess we can now open it up to the. See, let's get the questions. Questions rolling. Just scroll up to the. Yep, there it is. Ice Money asks, will the same level of interiors that the ship had... Hang on. Will the same level of interiors that the ship has be transferred to the other POIs as someone who plays with Greg off? Will there be other threats to the ship?
Currently, no. The first planned threat is the Leviathan. We have to figure. So, like, as a developer, no one wants you to turn off aspects of their game. So, from a design standpoint, I need to actually meet with people and talk to them about like how can we make the Greg something that's not like it's fair and it's fun to play with. So like that's a failure of design on our side in terms of basically like we it's I mean I don't have the analytical data and personally I need to add analytics to the custom game option so I know what people are turning on and off so I know what they find annoying, what they like, and just give us more ideas for like content in the future. But like that's something we need to fix. So like when we get to the point of pushing the Greg, then we'll come up with our ideas. We'll put it on experimental. We'll add better ways of countering them. We'll add ways of detecting them when they're sleeping, where they are, and just give you like more ways of playing with them, make them less frustrating. And then we'll throw it at you guys' reigns and then have an AMA or whatever the day after or a couple days after and be like, okay, how's this? What do you guys think? Is this better? Would you consider playing with him now? Would you not? And just kind of go from there. Because that's the biggest thing for Mr. Greggy is fixing him so people don't want to turn him off. And I'm sure there will still be people that do, but it's about lowering that number, in my opinion, from a design standpoint. And then obviously still giving the option regardless. There could be birds that we add that could do it, but ultimately it's going to be Leviathan because he's going to come by and attack, and he'll spit people onto the deck, similar to kind of like the Crisis 1 ending, where like those like huge like alien monsters will just like in Crisis 1. I think everyone's played that by now or seen the videos. At the end, where like, they go on the deck and they spit all those guys out and they try and overrun the deck and kill the command tower thingy. It'd be something like that where we'd allocate a health bar to different components of it, and then damaging those different components would affect the overall health of the carrier. If you ever played Star Wars Battlefront 2004 edition, a good example is like the engines have a health bar, and then the shield generator has a health bar, but all these subsystems have a health bar. But when you damage them, they contribute to the overall health decreasing. So you have to damage enough components to make the whole aircraft carrier go bye-bye. So theoretically, the Leviathan could. I'll have to kind of figure it out, because theoretically, the Leviathan should be able to speak it by itself, but the little guys would only be able to do so much damage. So theoretically, if you could get the Leviathan to retreat by giving him enough damage, and then the little guys just damage the top deck and a couple areas like that, you could still save the aircraft carrier by getting engineers on board and repairing the parts that are damaged. That's generally the idea we're going for. What was that RTS we played so far? The Star Wars one.
Star Wars Empire All.
That was a good example where they have those individual components. We'll be looking at that game. That's a better example. I don't think that many people have played Star Wars Battlefront 2 from 2004. But yes, just the Star Wars RTS game would be a better example of how we end up doing like components. Because eventually the vehicles will get a system like that. Eventually, when we can, that system, what we do for the aircraft carrier, will divvy down to the helicopters and to the ground vehicles, so they have critical units points that can apply a penalty for small durations of time, like in Company Heroes or Red Dragon. Pick and choose. Anyway, back to you, Dervi.
Yep. X Blaster asks, would it be possible to have scout units such as drones have an option when making a new game or mode to automatically go around the map and look for lieutenants or patient zero?
You have a drone now. Am I misunderstanding the question?
I think you're misunderstanding the question. They ask, the drone have an automatic option to go around the map.
Oh, they're talking about the auto explore feature from Age of Empires.
I think so, yeah.
Right? Something similar to that, where like you could tell the guy on the horse to basically just auto explore and he'll just reveal the entire map for you.
I think so, yeah. I think that's what they're getting at.
Let me write that down. I didn't think about that. That's actually a really good idea, because theoretically you could have that where like you just put them on auto mode and then they just run over the map. And you could have like one or two of them just doing that, finding threats, meeting new groups, like profiling them for you. Especially when we add the factions in, because it makes sense that CERC is the eye in the sky because they have Big Brother. in terms of like keeping an eye on everything. So theoretically, it would incentivize people to build clusters of drones, put them on explore mode, and then just keep updating the player's map. So when they look at a direction, they know there's a structure here. They know the infection are here. And like, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let me write that down just a second, Derivar.
Yep.
Auto explore mode for drones. Got it. Okay. Back to you, Derivar.
Yep. Certified Viking Wolf asks, with that on the Apache, does this mean much needed buff?
Does that mean mystery? I'm not understanding. You mean like does it still need another buff? I mean, once you have the 50 cal, once you have the minigun or whatever it is going, and then you have the FARs going, I mean, it's going to be pretty substantial. I mean, they'll fire their ammo pretty quickly. They'll probably like theoretically it would deplete its ammo in like a couple of attack runs, and you have to just take it back to refuel it. But I mean, theoretically, like the Apache is a super unit, but it theoretically shouldn't be the end all because it still has its limitations of ammo. The gas has never been an issue for that unit. It's more so been the ammo. So I mean, it should be. I mean, once I put it in there and I'm able to play test it, and we put it on experimental, it'll just be like, does it feel right for its population cost, doctrine cost, and just what it should be able to do in real life of just destroying stuff. So I mean, I would say so, but sometimes that doesn't work out based off what you think, and then when you actually go and try and do it. So I would say yes, but we'll have to wait and see for when I've done implementing it this week.
Yes, fine.
My goal is to have it on experimental tonight or tomorrow. So just bear with me here. You'll know. You'll know once you try it out. Well, I'll know it as well.
Yeah, I think we'll all know at the end.
We'll all know, yeah.
Ice Money, couldn't you use the patrol feature? Oh, that's just SC Video King. If you want to encourage wider builds, why not cause income multipliers for controlling adjacent zones or entire islands?
Wait, say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. SC Video King asks, if you want to encourage wider builds, why not cause income multipliers for controlling adjacent zones or entire islands?
A really good fucking idea.
Yeah, that is.
Hold on, let me write that down.
That's a really good idea.
Income multipliers based on island control, nearby zones. Got it.
Yep. Okay. Lizardman, will terrain eventually mild? Milled? Hang on. Milled. Okay. Will terrain eventually milled underneath walls that I think that's meant to be built underneath walls.
Yeah, I think it means conforming the terrain to the building so it's not as janky. Because right now we don't have a land deformation system. So when you build on an incline and the system makes a mistake and it's like, yeah, you could totally build on that hill, bro. And then your motor pool ends up floating over the marshland or something like that. So yeah, that's come up a couple times in our discussions. We think the proper way of doing it is how Rust does it, where you basically have a plot or like some kind of like what's the word, like foundation structure piece that goes under all the buildings. We think that would be the simplest way of doing it, instead of adding a terrain deformation system. If that doesn't work out, because basically we would have to, if we end up doing like the whole plot thing, it would be like we'd add like a foundation piece under every building, and then add a ramp or some kind of thing so it would conform to whatever's around them, and then it would just clip into the ground, and then we'd have to just test it everywhere. Theoretically, that would solve the problem. I think that's what Rust does to some degree. They just have those foundation pieces, and they just normalize it based off the highest point, I think. But I mean, I haven't looked at their code, so I don't know. But if that doesn't work out, when we can do more polish, then it would be doing some kind of terrain system where we can edit the landscape in real time. Obviously, it's a little bit more experimental and R&D, but we're not against it. It's just right now, to us, it's not a primary, like, that's more of an auxiliary wish list item. And we need to figure out something for the buildings. But our immediate goals right now are like early game civilian factions. And then after factions, we're gonna like kind of calm down a little bit and just take a recollection of all the systems and all the mechanics in the game, and then figure out which ones are lackluster, like the bounties, like the other stuff I was talking about last week. Make a priority list, process them through, and then get them out of here, get them done. And obviously the other coin thing we were talking about, either doing that list or doing co-op. So we're kind of, after factions, we're at like a crossroads where we're just like, should we push co-op or should we just polish even more of the core game? So then that way it's less work for us, but then our community's happier because they get the co-op, but there's still some lackluster systems in the game, like bounties, like what you're talking about for the building system, like auto refueling for helicopters when they're on patrol, so they know they'll leave the patrol, go to a nearby motor pool, refuel, then go back on their patrol. Otherwise, right now helicopters are suicidal. If you put them on a patrol and walk away, they'll kill themselves. They'll just fall out of the air and kill themselves because they don't know to go and get gas. It's like little quality of life things like that we need to like fix. So it's like it's a dilemma for our team because we know people want co-op, but at the same time, I'm advocating for the ladder list of just let's just finish up the last core systems and then go into Christmas to January focusing on co-op. It would be my ideal thing. But anyhow, back to you, Derivar.
Yep. That's funny. What will be the benefit of using civs over CERC RP purposes? Will they cost less population resources? 2 civs equals 1 CERC. CERC will some have maybe exotic weapons, different.
They'd have different weapons. They would have different health tables, different armor configurations. By all means, they'd be never on the level of the CERC, even the militarists. So the idea would be is you would only use them as cannon fodder. You would use them to buy yourself time. You don't have a base in an area. You can't build enough people quick enough for the helicopters for an AC-130 to come by. It just kind of comes. It's very situational in terms of like the civilian groups would never be on the same level as CERC. When it comes to the population, I'm open to the idea of making it like them cost less or have them give you a different population for these people that you recruit, maybe like 40 or another, like because they're so cheap. I don't know. But like we'll have to figure it out when we get to that point because we'll have an entire experimental where we introduce these systems and then we're going to be like, okay, tell us feedback. And then by the way, tell us in the channels or come to the next weekly roll up and tell us what you think about what we did, of our first implementation of civilian management. And then, like dynamic civilian groups. And then from there, you'd be like, okay, I like this, I don't like this, blah, blah, blah. So, that's our plan initially. And then once people play it, once we do it, because it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to implement it and find out it doesn't work, it's shit, blah, blah, blah. And then we have to alliterate on it. So that's our initial plan, and we have no problem alliterating on it, because the whole point is to have a 2 to 3 month span. Sorry, not month, 2 to 3 week span on just civilians. Just 1.2 is supposed to just be everything that I mentioned earlier for just civilian management, automation, ambient civilians, dynamic civilian groups. And if it bleeds over, it might bleed over a little bit. And it'll be based off of community feedback. It will be based off of bugs. It'll be based off of world events. I don't know. Something can always happen. But, you figure like that's the biggest thing is that it'll take the time it needs to flesh out those systems. So when we move on from civilians, they're at a point where we can leave it alone for a while and then go on the factions because they're all going to integrate with each other. All these systems are going to talk to each other. So what we build in 1.2 is going to directly interact with 1.3 for the factions. All right, back to you, Dermar.
Shaggy asks, maybe the Raiders could be sided with. Hang on, sided with that. What's with me today? Sided with that CERC would be, hey, here's guns, go nuts, kill whatever you want. We don't care if you kill do civilians. They are a threat. So the Raiders would go see CERC
No.
as, hey, they.
I think that when it comes to the Raiders, if I'm understanding this question correctly, the Raiders would be the only civilians that you can openly kill that you wouldn't be punished. Because no one, unless the Raiders have other Raider groups that they're friends with, the Raiders aren't going to have a possibility of like allying with other groups. Like in our first pass, if people are like want more level of complication, we might consider it. But our initial game design plan is just the Raiders are the unlikable assholes everyone wants to kill. And it's as simple as just kind of like, okay, like let's kill them all, or Pierce will kill them, or the other civilian groups will kill them, and Natalie will be indifferent to them. She just won't care. She's like, whatever, like they're more chaos for me. I'll capitalize on it. So, but she doesn't like them personally. Like that's just the disposition we're pushing. Um, and then maybe later on they can work together. We'll have to just kind of work that out for like Natalie and the Raider groups. We'll have to see how it feels. But yeah, does that answer your question, Dervar?
Yes, as far as I know. I think that looks like it answers the question.
Yeah.
It definitely looks like it. With them a chance to betrayal. This part here, with them having a chance to betray, would that mean betray CERC or betray someone else?
I think it
I'm not
means
sure.
CERC.
I'm not quite understanding that one.
If you're talking about CERC, there's no chance of them betraying you in the first pass of it. We don't plan on it. It wasn't like it was more so always a faction system like Fallout, where it was like once you're with someone, they're with you until you betray them. So like it's one of those things where basically like we'll take feedback. Is it if people really, really want us to add some kind of betrayal system, or where like some people will just be predispositioned, like a worm tongue from Game of Thrones, be like say everything you want to hear, and the moment you turn your back and you go and attack someone else, they'll attack you. We could push a system like that. We just don't know if people want that level of complication. So it's like of like layers. So like if there's a demand for it, when we get to the end of 1.2 and the people are like, well, we'd really like the groups that have some kind of way of betraying you. Because the only so I take that back. The only way theoretically they could betray you is if you kill a lot of civilians. So I take that back. If you go on a genocidal killing spree and you're killing civilians left and right, regardless of affiliation, everyone will hate you. All the dynamic civilian groups will hate you. That counts as a betrayal. So technically, that's the only betrayal that you could actually, with the civilian groups that you could generate, is you just literally just start bombing indiscriminately. You kill a bunch of civilians, and then based off of the system we run that simulates people talking and communities talking to each other, the groups that are furthest away from you would hate you the least, and the ones that are the closest would hate you the most because the story is fresh in their eyes or whatever. Like it got to them because we have a system that pulls the navigation. And theoretically, for people that really still want to do their killings, if you close off sections of the city, then the information doesn't travel. So if you were to close off a bridge or blow a bridge, and then you just literally just have to like blow up and kill everyone on that entire island, people on other islands will never know about it. So as long as you keep that bridge contained via a wall, via you destroy it, after a certain amount of time, it stops trying to send out that news that you're killing people indiscriminately, and then you can rebuild the wall. So theoretically, if you want to go in there and kill a bunch of civilian groups, you got to kill the flow of information of like cordon off the zone, then go in and kill everyone, or basically like find a way of like destroying bridges, finding ways where like, or if you don't care about collateral damage in some of these zones, you can wall off those zones of half the island or a quarter of the island, and then sending your squads to basically eliminate people. Whatever you want to do, I don't care. That's why we have those systems. Is that people
Basically,
can play
genocide
however they
without
want.
consequences.
It's however you want to play the game. It's just be aware those are the systems that are running behind the scenes, and those systems will get a facelift a little bit when we go into civilians to make sure they're still fully functioning because they're there, but you guys don't actually get to see them because civilians, they don't attack you. There's no consequence to killing civilians. Like with this system, those groups will come to your base and throw Molotovs at you. They'll launch attacks on you. They'll launch attacks on each other. So the idea is with this dynamic civilian group is that you'll start to see some consequences to your actions of being a dick. Or if you're a nice guy and you're helping everyone, then you'll see consequences of that because they'll let you recruit out of their ranks in a time of dire need. And theoretically, if you build next to them, they'll protect you and you can protect them. That kind of deal, because then they'll hear the noise and run over and help you. Now, currently, there's no system in place to request help from a group. To keep that in mind, from like a civilian group, there's no system to be like, hey, you come over here, I need your help, we're allied. But that'll kind of come down to like playtesting. Do we feel like it's needed? When we get to experimental, do we feel like people want the feature to be able to take these groups? They just want to make them like they're just static emplacements. They just kind of defend and you kind of help each other, or do they want us to go that extra layer? Personally, I think that we're going to end up having to go the route because we would set the foundational piece with dynamic civilians, and then eventually we would upgrade it to the factions. So when Pierce and Natalie are in the game, you could put down flags, similar like Red Dragon or Company Heroes, where like group allies would like respond to those flags based off of like, oh, they want help over here, or they want you to follow. You want someone to follow a unit. So that just kind of comes down to community feedback. Because we don't want to go too deep to the point where the game is just too complicated, but we want to make sure it's still fun and rewarding for everyone. So it's like a juggling act. Anyway, back to you, Durvar.
Yep. So vehicles will go under modular. So vehicles will get modular damage similar to. Hang on, Men of War Assault Squad. I think.
Men of
Where
War,
you
I
could
haven't
knock
played too
out a
much of that
track or
game.
a turret.
That's a goal,
Right.
yeah. Is that we eventually? That's why somebody was asking on the Steam forums. I think it was a couple days ago, and they were. Or was it Discord? I think it was Discord, where they were asking like, why are there pilots and drivers you can build? Right now, there's no purpose to them, but when you keep driving people through a town and civilians are targeting your drivers via sniper rifles, you might have to get a new driver out there. And then deploy your team to basically protect the vehicle until a driver can get up there and get the car out of there. Or like, the idea is we want to eventually, when things calm down after civilian management and factions, either one of these auxiliary items we want to hit upon is we want to add a crew veterancy, like in Command and Conquer 0 Hour, where those pilots and those drivers are indisposable. They're like, once you get them up to a certain veterancy level, they reload the guns quicker, they fire quicker, and they just have better handling on the vehicles, something along those levels. Or maybe they just like have more ML, more health. Like we're just kind of playing with it, but we want to add veterancy levels to the pilots and the drivers, so those carry over to the vehicles that they're put into, so that you're more inclined to kind of keep them alive. And when they do parachute out and survive, you want to actually mount a mission to save them. So now you have these little mini dynamic missions. I can't think of the word. There's a word for it, but it's like dynamic gameplay. I don't know if it's procedural. There's like a fancy game design term that's been coined for that, but it's basically like story. It's like player-made stories, which are better sometimes than preset stories because then it's like it reacts to how you're playing. I don't remember what it was called, but like yeah, so something along those lines. That's the goal for the system, for that incremental damage. For like, although the treads are broken, get an engineer up there, repair it. They shoot the driver, get a new driver out there, or just abandon the vehicle, and somebody will eventually, like the anarchists, will come and steal it, and they'll break it down for chop. Because the idea is the anarchists are going to steal your shit, they're going to steal everyone else's shit. So the idea is that like they're just recyclers. They're just taking your vehicles and they're turning them into like the battle bus. They're turning them into the technical. It's just a universal scrap resource. They just collect. They take it to the chop shops and they just break it down. So if you're an enemy of the anarchists, they'll just ambush you, take your shit and run when you're like not paying attention and try and kill everyone. Like ambush your units basically. So that's the idea that we're going for. Going into 1.3 is like think of the GLA stealth general. That's Natalie, where it's like you're driving through the city. They just will give them like blankets or something so they can hide from your night vision or whatever. They'll just pull it off, shoot all your people, take your stuff and run. And then by the time you can send a team to get that vehicle, if it wasn't properly defended, then they're gone, the vehicle's gone, you lost your money in terms of the units you just invested and in terms of the vehicle you just invested. So that's the design goal for Natalie, just to kind of give an idea, like going into like why we're going to put these systems in place. So then that way there's like, you know, the whole vehicle damage system and being able to kill the driver or pilot. Anyway, back to you, Derek. Sorry, went off on my rants.
That's right. That's right. When it comes to factions, would the anarchist factions hide themselves along with regular civilians and do things such as stealing vehicles, sabotaging? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, pretty
even
much all of that.
Bomb.
Yeah, all of that, pretty much. We're thinking of the anarchists as just a force of chaos. So if you make an enemy of them, it's gonna be an enemy you hate because they'll use suicide bombers and civilians. They'll walk up to your gate, just blow up right in front of your gate, and they'll flood in, or they'll let civilians flood in. I guess the best example you can think of the anarchists is if you ever seen Maze Runner, the third movie, where it's basically like they'll do whatever they have to do to get into your walled garden. Because like you figure they're just all about like they don't trust the government, they don't trust peers, and they're all just about like, okay, let's cause as much chaos as possible and let's just have anarchy and have Natalie in charge. So that's the idea, is that they'll have suicide bombers, they have their snipers, their sniper hybrid unit, and then they have their rifleman hybrid unit. And they'll get more personality, more AI associated with them, because right now they're just so bare bone. And again, that's one of the major things. We'll focus on Pierce, then we'll do Natalie last, because she's the more complicated. Because ultimately, Natalie is going to be the faction you just can't find. There's about probably like 10 or so hollowed out buildings in the entire game. And the idea is that dynamic civilian groups will populate those hollowed buildings out, and Natalie will. And they'll be in disguise when they're not doing something mischievous. So you don't know if that's Natalie or just Joe and his family just moved in yesterday. And you won't know until you do an act of aggression, or you basically like use clues of like, wait, they stole this vehicle. The vehicle came back this way, went into that garage, and there's a bunch of like people there. So they stole my vehicle, or they're stealing Pierce's vehicles, or they're stealing like ambient vehicles in the world, and they're bringing them here. Oh, that's Natalie. Let's kill them all, or let's make an introduction and see if we can ally with them. So that would be generally the direction, because ideally when you first start, everyone's going to be neutral to you, and then Pierce and Natalie either learn to love or hate you based off of how you play. Natalie doesn't give a damn if you kill civilians, so at least for that part it won't affect you. She'll be more of like the dark side, like the whole Paragon like Fallout system, where it's like she's the evil side and Pierce is the good side, whatever. So doing bad things, she'll be indifferent or like you. Doing good things, Pierce will like you, and obviously he'll hate you for killing civilians. And that's generally the direction it's going in. Back to you, Durvar.
Yep. For the suicide bombers, could we have crazed bombers who will use shrapnel covered with blood, infected blood outside your gates when it gets busy, and it can cause an outbreak within your walls, or if your troops close.
I'll write that down, but we don't have any. So it's come up a couple times that people want to be able to weaponize the virus. I don't know if they're going to do that for the factions. I'll put that on a wish list item, because if we do that, it would most likely just be like everyone would get some faction of it, or like the CERC can fire like mortars filled with like CERC, like with like the infection Pangu virus, or like that way like they do what the Combine do, where they shell an area, turn everyone, and then go in and kill everyone. Because then that way no one hates them, because they don't know who infected them to begin with. So those are things that we're talking about, but those are like super in the far lane of like, because again, like we do it to one, we gotta do it to all of them. Everyone has to have an ability to counter it, an ability to use it. So that would be an entire update comprised of a system like that. And Derek has expressed interest. I've expressed interest in it in our development Discord, but it's more so just we have a lot more things rolling right now until we can get to that point.
Has anyone had their hand up? Okay. Vrishnak, I'm pretty sure Vrishnak's had his hand up for a while, so let's bring him in.
For an eon.
Yeah. All right, let's bring Vrishnak in and see what they've got to say.
Are you still there?
I'm here.
Hello.
Starting to think that y'all weren't taking hands today.
Sorry.
No, I just forget to check it.
I think he was during the backlog from texts, and then like sometimes people ask questions like 20 minutes ago, and he was trying to catch up on that before we get a hand.
Makes sense.
We'll have to work on that. Anyway, back to you.
So I literally just finished writing this out, but my question was based on something you brought up earlier about the different civilian groups. It like
Yeah?
if you ever, like when you recruit troops from their groups, but then did something to essentially make the group they came from hate you, would it make do you have it where it will make those recruited troops will turn on you because of that?
Right now? No.
Or is that in the thought process?
No, there's not. That wasn't even in the thought process. That was like we figured that once you buy those units and you use them and you own them, they're like, wow, CERC is great, and they're sipping the Kool-Aid in terms of like basically like being loyal to you. But like we haven't gone to that level of like, should we even? That hasn't even come up in a discussion. It's not a bad idea. It's just more so like we're gonna have to experiment with a system like that because could that get annoying? But it's like,
yeah, and it'd be
well,
one of
because
those things too. Like if you had give them personalities, for instance, you could make it where even if you did betray their group and most of their friends would get pissed off, they're like, "Ha, I didn't like that group anyways," or "I'm chaotic. I don't care."
well, I guess the question would be, I guess the comparison that I can make for a system like this, 'cause as far as I know, I don't know if there's an RTS game that allows you to do that, but the closest comparison I can make to a system like that would be like when you play a game like Mass Effect or whatever, and you keep making choices where the companion hates your choices, they start to talk down to you, or in some
Mhm.
cases they'll leave you. So, but as far as I know, they never try and kill you. So I guess the thing is that like I wonder if that would get annoying if like you accidentally kill a bunch of people and then you have those guys somewhere doing another operation. And then because you accidentally killed those people are going to turn on you and they're going to immediately try and kill your guys. So I don't know if that would be annoying because everyone has a radio theoretically. So it's like, I mean, that could be an option. That could be a custom game option where like by default it's off. You go?
Personally, I would actually like it because it would
Okay.
put more weight into my decisions and making sure. Oh well, I want to be allies with these. Maybe I should make sure have my men be a bit more careful where they're throwing their grenades, for instance.
I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna write that down, and then we get to the point of implementing it. Just feel free to just kind of like, you know, message me and just kind of like check in to see how that's going for whatever reason. Just kind of advocate. I have no problem for you pushing your agenda of like, hey, this would be really cool. What are you guys doing on this? How is this going? Like, I have no problem with that. So if like you want to just like keep a tab on that in terms of like just advocating for that, getting other people on board, I'm not against it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I get what you
But
mean.
yeah, I'm gonna write that down. So that'll be on the wish list for when we get to 1.2. Oh, Derivar, next person real quickly though. Well, that was your only question, right?
Couldn't even remember the other question I had, so no worries about that.
Okay.
To also
How do we-
to add a bit more. Oh, thank you very much, Freshnight, for coming in. To add a bit more onto that too, Robert, you said you didn't know any RCS game that had people betray you.
Well,
Total
I
War.
don't. They Total War, but they don't betray you in the battle. They betray you outside the battle, so you have time to react.
Yeah, technically. Well, not really, because they attack you immediately.
But typically, they're never in a. I mean, I could be wrong, but typically, most of the time, they're not always in the perfect position to make the most damage. Typically, they're on an outlying colony, and they're just like, "I'm gonna kill you," and then they do it, and it's like you have time to react because they still have to move to you. Sometimes I think they do it next to you on the border of your zone, but typically you have enough time to react. And my concern is with this, it's instant. You kill that person, they get the radio call, and we can even put the radio call cue there, like continuator, so you can hear it in terms of like CERC betrayed us, and then it starts shooting your guys immediately. So it's just like I don't know if that'd be annoying, but it sounds cool. I kind of like it. So maybe it'd be a custom game option.
That made me think of something too. If that did get implemented, you could have CERC countermeasures for instances like that, where you can at least delay the chance of them betraying you for that, or maybe make it seem a bit more in a positive light, and it kind of does a 50-50 deal with the recruited units.
Well, I mean, the compromise I would think of is that you could theoretically, it would make sense if the CERC has radio jammers. So you could have it to where basically you could have radio jammers with the radio operator, and you could have mobile ones somewhere in the base where like the information doesn't get back to them. So then that way, like you could use them to do an operation or do something like that, and then you could be like, well, they're gonna once they hear about this, they're gonna kill me anyway, and then you could kill all of them. I don't know. I'm just talking out loud. Radio jammers are a thing, and technically they'd be, communicating through a radio of like the main faction HQ. So,
Ooh. This
'cause
one guy mentions, paying them off, so you pay the media to turn away from them.
I'm gonna write that down. Well, this is all recorded anyway, so I'm gonna come back to this and basically just kind of like use this as notes to basically just kind of brainstorm this. Hey Duravar, question for you: how come we can't put them back to the audience? Did they break something?
No, I can just do this. So is that all you got, Rishtek?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much for coming along.
How'd you do that?
You right click on someone, you can actually at the very top it's got leave the stage.
Oh, but I thought that leaves I thought you leave when you do that.
Oh no. If I right click on you, for instance, I can get you to leave the stage.
That's weird wording. Okay, anyway, next person on voice. Other people have raised their hands now.
Yep. Okay, so we got Dan the Man. He was next.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hello. Pretty good. Hit us with it.
Yeah, okay. So my question would have to be, it's not really targeted around what you probably guys, because I joined about halfway through, but I've been meaning to ask about the aircraft carrier. Now, is there going to be any point where we will be able to actually physically move it, as in be it a controlled unit or allow it to go to at the start of the game, be at a different point? Because my idea was, is there any idea for using the weapons on board, such as the Sea
Yes.
Whiz, and to my oh, that is going to be nice.
Yes to all of the above. It's just a matter of it's like the aircraft carrier. No one knew we were going to do it. It wasn't on
Yeah.
the roadmap. It was just one of those things that we wanted to do to give the player a safe harbor, because people kept starting on the starting island, and then the infection would start right in front of them, and then they get killed, and they get mad and like post somewhere online
Yeah.
about it. So we were like, fine, we'll give the CERC a neutral ground to start on. And that was the aircraft carrier. And then that evolved into basically like, okay, let's have an interior made. Let's brig it. So inevitably, it's going to become a mobile command base. It's going to be able to move.
Wow.
You're going to be able to build airborne units off of it, and it's going to have a health bar. Just
That
cover
is
the layers of when we can
wow.
do it. Yeah, it's not like on the roadmap, but it's more so like when time allows, we basically just implement one or two things in subsystems like that. So the next time we touch that would most likely be, if I had to guess, the next time we touch that would probably be right before factions, or a
That's
little bit
actually
after
pretty good. Yeah.
But like
And
it's about a month or so.
Yeah. And my last question is from a friend who actually was interested in the game about it. Would there be any form of versus, specifically someone controlling the infected, versing be it other players or only one other player, them being CERC? Sorry, I can't pronounce that name properly.
Yes. So, how we're basically designing the game is we're starting to make changes more to the infected and other people. Well, more so the infected and CERC, to make them like, support that level of, if someone was playing as the infected, do they have a builder unit? How do they play? What's their early game look like? What's their mid game look like? What's their late game look like? And not as much as like faking it, like it's been historically via like dynamic systems. So we're moving in that direction. When we get the co-op, it'll be situational. But at the co-op, there might be a couple other things we have to do for polish's sake, depending on just how things where things land in Halloween, going into Christmas, and then we'd focus on the co-op. It'll be polish a couple more things, and then it'll be multiplayer versus at that point, and it'll be modding, and it will be versus, because you figure
that is wow.
Yeah, because it's gonna be, because we want to push modding. We're gonna partner with Mod.io, We're gonna do it on Steam as well, so that way it works on Epic Games Store and it works on Steam. We'll have to figure out some kind of balance, juggling out of the two, or just favor Steam.io. We're not sure yet because Steam.io is more open source to every storefront, so theoretically
Yeah,
it
it
would work
is.
on any platform we put it on. So we might get rid of Steam Workshop when we basically get to that point, and then just have it where like Insurgency does it, where basically it just automatically logs in from your Steam app ID, and you don't have to do anything. Because I know Insurgency does it on Steam, and there's a couple other games on Steam that do it, like Chivalry. I think the new Chivalry has it. I don't remember. I had to. Don't quote me on that. I don't know about Chivalry, but I know Insurgency is on there.
No, all
And I
good,
know a
all
couple
good.
other games are on there, but that's something we're looking into, because for us, modding is huge for the ecosystem. In terms of
Oh, yeah, I can
yeah,
understand that. It allows you
so-
to open up the scope of like your own game, making it even more
absolutely.
enjoyable.
So for us, it's about like the baby steps to get to that point of just what is basically that's 1.5 ish, 1.4, 1.5 is what we're talking about in terms of modding
Okay.
and versus and all that stuff.
Mm.
So, but it is planned, and if you're gonna, how it would work is basically like co-op is that you would divvy up resources for the infected, and then basically like, okay, you're gonna play like basically someone joins as the infected master, someone joins as the stroke master, and that's basically the overall commander or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's like the game master, and he would delegate your resources of like, okay, like you're gonna get this lieutenant, you're gonna play as Chelsea, you get this much population, you know, do whatever you want to do. So like one player's job could be to take a Angel Island and build up an infection pool, and then transfer those infected units to the main island for the other two players or the other player that's basically like fighting more of a conflict with the factions, fighting with CERC.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah, I can
idea,
feel that.
regardless, is to get it to where you can play like the overall goal would be to get it to the point where you can play as the infected on co-op, or you can play as a circus co-op. So
Oh,
if you want to play as the infected and fight AI CERC, you can do that. And you can play as a co-op game on that side and see how it is on the other side of like how the CERC react to you and what you would do, like the Juggernauts and Leviathans, bring in all those super units, fuck up the aircraft carrier, all that stuff. So
Greg coming in
that
hot indeed.
basically, so you can have your own Greg. So that's why when people are like, how long are you going to be in early access? It's going to be until like those systems are in there. So it's like we plan
Yeah.
on 4 years. We're halfway through. Yeah, we came out in 2020. So we're 2 years in. And our goal is by next year, regardless, it's going to be co-op and it's going to be modding. And then the year after
Ooh.
that will be campaign and cherry on the top, icing, whatever. So 2023 is just multiplayer really.
Fair
And
enough.
co-op,
Well, I
and
hope
then
you guys take your
2024
time.
is campaign. Yeah, because that's the biggest thing. Is that like I know some people came in on our Discord and got really mad at us because we're in early access and we're not done yet. But we're only like
I can
5
understand.
people, and
Mm.
basically it's like 5 people on the entire team. So sometimes things take longer. Sometimes we
Yeah,
do
they
things
do.
wrong.
You
But
guys have a smaller team, so you need to take your time and polish things.
yeah,
So you got to
yeah,
take your time, and I respect that. And to be honest, I'm a person that's kind of say you got to take your time.
yeah,
Better,
yeah.
better take longer than a rushed game.
Absolutely, because you figure like it's one of those things where like historically sometimes we have rushed some systems and then
Mm.
suffered for it. So it's one of those things where like we need to kind of find a balance. And me and Derv are talking about this a lot in terms of what the community wants and what we could do as a team with 5 people. So it's like I guess you could say finding the sweet spot and making sure the community is happy, but we're also developing at a good pace on the healthy on like the development side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It
Because
does. Most whole.
so we're always wrestling with that. That's always that's why like sometimes you'll see negative reviews talking about this or comments talking about this, or it's like, look, we literally cannot do a tutorial right now, which is not possible, or we're still hunting down this bug. We're still trying to fix that performance. So it's a juggling act. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is sometimes we have to get it wrong before we get it right. And that's
Yeah.
and that's the other thing about game design that I was trying to explain on a review recently, where it's like it's not game design is not a linear path. It's like you go this way and then you go that way and then you go back and then you go forward because you're experimenting. You're trying to figure out what's fun. You're trying to figure out what people want. If it's too much, if it's too complicated, if the performance is right. How's the scalability on the deck? How's the scalability on a Mac? Like that kind of stuff. Where it's like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like finding the sweet spot. And I think
I
it's
do
like
know.
yeah. So it's kind of one of those things where like we've got a lot of flack for that recently, but
Yeah.
in early
Yeah.
access, we've kind of had the like. I guess it's part of being like whatever. Regardless, when you make a product, you have to be able to take feedback, criticism.
Mm.
But it's one of those things where it's just kind of like we take we listen to everything regardless. So it's about
Yeah.
taking all that feedback and then being like, okay, is there some truth in what they're saying? Can we learn something from it, even if they're saying it in the most rude, like you would never talk to someone in person like that. So I guess that's kind of it at the same time in terms of like, and that's another reason why I try to do these weekly, so I can talk to people and figure out like, are we going about something wrong? Are we not planning something out correctly? Like some systems like bugging people, like so that's basically what we advocate for, is just kind of keeping that open line of communication.
Well, keeping a communication with your fan base is, and I mean an actual physical talk session with them, helps you get the information that you need. And I think I've been holding up this for a bit too long, so I'm done
You're
with my
fine.
questions.
Oh, you're
Thanks,
good.
man.
All right, back to you, Durvar.
Yes.
Pick someone else.
Oh, hold on. I'll leave the stage. There it is.
Okay, that works too.
All right, we'll go with Certified. There we go.
Sorry, I was playing Saints Row at the same time as listening.
That's right.
How was that game? I heard it was buggy. It's like,
Yeah, it's very buggy, but I do like it.
I love Saints Row. I'm right by it. Anyway, back to I distracted you.
Yeah.
I was watching Big
So,
Five play it.
So one, I'm taking credit for the aircraft idea.
Okay.
I suggested it months ago.
I can't remember that one actually. But anyhow, what was your question?
Yeah, so got a bit confused on the helicopter issue. It's just you mentioned all the weapon updates. Does that mean
Yes.
that the Apache's getting a buff? Is what I meant.
Yes. I mean, the buff would technically be giving it more, giving it the fear of the FARS weapon, but basically it has missile pods. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna have a hell of a lot more like impact on your gameplay, because you figure now it's just gonna unload missiles in the hillsides and the cities when you're moving it around. Yeah, so I mean, I would call that a buff. It just comes down to making sure it's not too overpowered and limiting how many missiles it has, so you have to actually come back and get ammo for that, or you can stay longer in the field with the 50 cal, or I forget the technical name of the gun. If you just want to like keep exerting some more like control over an area.
Could also make it cost money to rearm it, so you've got more limited amount of use.
We only plan on doing that for the mortar, because the mortar is
Right.
going to get a good old balancing, like and when we can in between, to basically make it like Red Dragon, where it's like you can fire like 18 or like 16 rounds, and then like the rounds after that are really expensive, and you have to have a logistics strain to supply them, and then we'll buff their damage, because they're like, it takes like 1 billion of them just to kill one goddamn pod. But we did that because it was like people were abusing the hell out of mortars to the point where they destroyed everything with like 8 mortars. So we did that as like a temporary workaround to give us more time
Yeah.
to solve that. So that's on our list. It's one of the auxiliary items of like we're gonna do in between everything else.
I didn't have another question, but I did have a suggestion.
My body is ready.
Sorry, what?
My body is ready. I'm ready.
Oh.
Hit me with it.
So when it comes, you've asked me about base building before in DMs.
Yeah.
So I've found an issue when it comes to the civilians. I know civilians aren't properly implemented yet, but it's hard to get them into like a base or a safe area because of the gates don't react to them. So maybe a civilian specific gate.
Hold on. Write that down. I shouldn't be doing that. And once you own them, they should be opening for you automatically. So I'm just I'll just regroup with the programmers tonight, and we'll look into that to figure out why they're not reacting properly.
Even on the option where you auto do it, the civilians won't walk in. Your troops will, but the civilians
I'll
won't.
fix that. We'll fix that. Don't worry about that. That's simple enough. I hadn't seen it. Maybe someone put it in a bug report and I missed it, but I hadn't seen that. So we'll put some time into that tonight to fix that. It'll be in the next experimental.
Fair dues. That's all for me.
Okay. Alrighty. Oh, it does work. Okay. Derivire, let's wrap this up because I have to finish up the vehicle turrets. So I guess pick a couple more questions.
All right. Well, we got 3 more hands up, so we can handle these 3, and then.
I'm thinking about the
we'll
people
get
writing
into-
questions in the text channel, or is no one writing?
I don't think anyone's written questions. Because I've seen a lot of people just talking in there.
Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, let's just wrap it up with voice questions because I have to I have to hit an energy drink and then I got to finish up the system tonight.
All right. So let's bring Shaggy in. Oh, they're muted.
Hello.
Hello, how's it going?
I'm doing good. I had a questions about the aircraft carrier when
Sure.
it becomes the mobile base, and since the civilians get rescued there, if we will be able to move the aircraft carrier to like a harbor at some point and make a massive evacuation there.
Oh, do we have a harbor that can facilitate that? We have one in Angel Island. We have we have a couple of harbors where the aircraft carrier could come in and dock. I'm not sure. I'll have to let me write that down as something to look into because that's not a bad idea. Because at the very least, that could be interesting. I don't know what the protocol is for having an aircraft carrier to offload vehicles. I think they have to be amphibious vehicles. I don't know if the aircraft carriers can. I don't think they have it. No, I don't think they can actually. It would have to be like either bridges go over and it connects them so ground infantry can invade an island, or it would have to be airborne units or Chinooks. I don't think our aircraft carrier has that battlefield thing where like vehicles can come out and it like has that door that comes down that can land so people can get off because beaches could be cool. Do you know what he's talking about, Derivar?
I think I do, sort of, kind of.
I'll have to do some
Um,
research
I-
on that because I don't think our aircraft carrier would support that for land like vehicle dismounts.
Yeah.
But for people, that'd be interesting.
I think he's talking about the back of the carrier in Battlefield. It can
Yeah,
drop LAVs.
yeah. I think Michael was saying that our striker can go in water. I think it's amphibious to some degree. Our version that we chose, but I don't know. I mean, technically, we could just make it a hybrid unit and then just give it the ability to just go in the water and deploy from there. But I don't know if that would actually that actually our striker could support that. But I'll write that down as a wish list item for the carrier because that's a cool idea. I like that idea. Okay. 2 more. Derivar. I gotta get back to working.
Right. Do we have any in podcast questions? Since it doesn't seem like hands being taken. Oh, that's Rich next before he joined us. About the whole Xbuster. How about the whole thing of having guys you recruit defecting and attacking you because you pissed off their faction, etc. If you have this enabled, you can have a morale system for your own guys. So you don't have a strict system of need to know. They're not told, and then etc. And they're not told. And they're not told much even about what's going on around them in other zones, but it could possibly impact them and their.
Trying to read that myself to get an idea. That is so deep that I wouldn't want to jump on that just yet until we've gotten more of the core established. I get what you're going at, and that basically goes into the idea of having some kind of radio jammer or some kind of way of locking ways of people knowing information. but that gets so like high level to where it's like I gotta wait to see just how everything comes together, and then just make the call at that point based off of like when we get to that of like, okay, do we like would implement that and should we and all that other stuff. So I will put a pin in that, and we'll come back to that. One more Duravar.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to take one last hand, and that's pre. I'm not sure. Hold up. All right, I'm going to take
Right?
Pry. Yeah, around about that.
So yes, it is Pry.
Oh, hi.
Yep. So, the I'm currently playing the current public build, and I cannot actually rearm my Shawnees, the attack helicopters.
You're filling it at the motor pool or the helipad?
The motor pool, where you
And you
actually buy them.
and you landed it on the helipad itself, and it still refuses.
Yes.
What happens if you land it by the helipad or the barracks? Does it refuel? This is more of
I haven't actually tried that yet. So
try it when you get a chance. Regardless, message me in DMs
all
to
right.
remind me that you're having that issue, and
Will
then
do.
I'll have that looked at tonight.
All right. That's it.
Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't really a full question, so Duravar, one more, please.
Yep. Whoever puts their hand up quick or puts one in text.
One question.
Caribbean. Yep. Carbarde beat them to it. Would hiring from factions have a pop cap of its own, or will it be shared with the CERC pop cap?
At this point, we're going to share it with the CERC one. It should be understood that when we're going to look into increasing the population of CERC once factions are implemented in 1.3, we need to know like where like everything falls in terms of performance on all of our computer configurations we support, and then from there figure out how much we can free up for just people playing for CERC. Ideally, we're looking at increasing it by like 40 to 60, but it'll just kind of come because when the map gets larger, their pop is going to have to increase as well. So it's another concern we're looking at because it's about to get a landmass like 3 times the size of all of our islands put together. So it's like it's the biggest area we've ever constructed, and it's ginormous. So that's something we're thinking about, and we know people consistently are mentioning the whole pop thing. It's just we have to wait till 1.3, and then we're gonna look at that, and just do it. But we could also look at ways of decreasing their pop cost for the ones that you recruit from those things because they're such cannon fodder, or just make them so cheap because they're cannon fodder that it doesn't really matter because you can just keep replacing them really quickly. But those are all things that we'll look at as we get into 1.2, going into 1.3. This is just basically like getting our all core all established and ready to go for that interaction systems. Okay, that's it. All right, David, you can wrap it up. Yeah.
Yeah, let's wrap it up and head on out. All right. Well, I'd like to extend a thank you to Robert for being here. And a thank you to the entire community for coming in and sharing your questions and asking your questions and whatnot. And yeah, we shall be off. And if you'd like to continue to support the development of Cepheus Protocol, they do also have a Patreon and a merchandise store if you'd like to wear some shirts with CERC all over it. So everyone have a fantastic night or day, whichever one it is for you. Shall catch you later.
Bye-bye.